All right, so we spent some time working on solving two variable matrices. So we are going to switch to working with elimination when you have three variables. Okay, and then we're going to come back and work on doing matrices when you have three variables. Okay, so we're kind of jumping back and forth a little bit here. The idea is to give you a little gap of time where if you're still struggling with the two variable matrices, you have some time to kind of figure those out a little bit more before we move on to the bigger ones. Okay, so we're going to do solving elimination with three variables. So this is very similar to solving with two variables with elimination, but it's a little bit like you have to be a little bit more organized. Okay, so that's the first thing that we're going to worry about here is we're going to label our equations. Okay, and it's just to kind of keep track of which ones we're talking about. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to give each one of these a shape name. So like I'm going to call this first one heart, and I'm going to call this one square, and I'm going to call this one smiley face. Okay, just so that when we're talking about these, like it gets really confusing after a while to know which one you're talking about, and this way we can like be really clear about it. Okay, so what we're going to do, we've labeled each equation just to make it easier to talk about. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use any two equations to cancel, a variable. Okay, it does not matter which one. You can choose whichever one's the easiest one. Okay, with one little caveat. So we're going to cancel this variable. Then we're going to use two other equations to cancel the same variable. Okay, cancel the same variable. So basically what I want to do is I want to look and I want to figure out one letter that I can use that I'll be able to use like two equations to cancel that letter and then use the other two to cancel it again. Okay, so we're going to have to do canceling of two different ones. So the same letter, but two different pairs of equations. All right. Once you do that, that's going to give you, each one of those is going to give you a new equation that only has two variables in it. You're going to use those two new equations to cancel a different variable. Okay, and then from there, you'll be able to just go back and plug in. So you'll be able to take that answer and plug it into one of the two equations you made here to figure out another variable, and then take both of those answers and plug them back into an original to find the final answer. Okay, so this will make a little bit more sense as we go through it. So I'm going to look at these, and the first thing that I want to do is I want to figure out one variable that's going to be easy to cancel. Okay, now this particular system, there's a few different ones that are pretty easy, right? It would be pretty easy to cancel these x's because I could just multiply like this top equation by -1 and add it to the middle equation. That would cancel the x's. I could multiply the top equation by -1, add it to this one. That would cancel the x's. So that's a great option. The y's would be pretty easy to cancel too because that's just a 1, right? Multiply the top equation by 2, it'll cancel this one. Multiply by 3, it'll cancel that one. So that would work. The z's, I could multiply by +5 to cancel this one and by -2 to cancel that one. So we have 3 options here that are all really solid. It doesn't matter which one you pick. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do, I think I'm going to go with the y's. Okay, so I think I'm going to cancel the y's on this one. So here's what I'm going to write. So to cancel these top two equations using the y's, I'm going to multiply the top equation by 2 and add it to the second equation. So what I'm going to write here is we call that top equation heart. So I'm going to say that I'm doing 2 times the heart equation and I'm adding it to the square equation. Okay, and it's just a little note to help keep track of what's going on. So 2 times the heart equation is going to be 6x minus 2y plus 2z equals -2. And then we're adding the square equation. So I'm just copying that one underneath. And we're going to add these together. So 6x plus 3x is 9x. My y's cancel. 2z and then -5z is -3z. And then that's going to add to -18. Okay, so that is step number 2, I guess, based on what we have here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and I need to find a different pair of equations that I can also use to cancel the y's. So I already used these guys. This time I'm going to use the top one and the bottom one. So I'm going to multiply this equation by 3 and add it to that equation. So I'm doing 3 times my heart equation plus smiley face. So 3 times heart, that's the top one, is going to be 9x minus 3y plus 3z equals -3. And then plus smiley face, so I'm just going to copy that one underneath. And we're going to add these together. So that adds to 12x. Those cancel. That adds to 5z, right? And that adds to 3. Okay, and then these are my two new equations. Okay, so from here, right, I'm looking at these equations and I'm going to need to somehow cancel one of these two variables. So I'm looking at these particular equations and sometimes it'll work out really nicely. This one isn't perfect, right? There's no number I can multiply 9 by to get 12. There's no number I can multiply 3 by to get 5, right? So there's not anything that's wonderful, okay? So one of the things that you can do as sort of a cheat is like, see how on this guy, those are all divisible by 3, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rewrite this equation by dividing everything by 3 and make it 3x minus 1z equals negative 6, right? And that's just going to make it a little bit easier to work with. So it's the same equation. It's just simplified a little bit. Sometimes you'll have to do that. Sometimes you won't, okay? And then I'm going to label these two new equations. So I'm going to call this one star, and I think I'm going to call this one, I'm just going to give it like a really like black dot, black hole. Okay, so now, right, step 1 we labeled. Step 2, we canceled the variable here. Step 3, we canceled the same variable. Now, step 4 is we're going to use these two new equations, star and dot, to cancel another variable. Okay, so the easiest thing that I could do now, I could multiply this by negative 4 to cancel the x's, or I could multiply by 5 to cancel the z's. It doesn't matter which one. I think I'm going to do 5 times this guy to cancel the z's. So I'm going to do 5 times star plus dot, right? And our goal here is to cancel the z's. So 5 times this equation is going to be 15x minus 5z equals negative 30. Then I'm going to copy dot just below it. Okay, so this adds to 27x. Those cancel. That adds to negative 27. And now this is a little baby equation that's just got one variable. Divide both sides by 27. X is negative 1. All right, great. And then from here, it's just a substitution game. So now I know x is negative 1. So now I'm going to plug x equals negative 1 into either star or dot. Okay, it doesn't matter which one. I'm going to go with star just because the numbers are a little smaller. It looks like it'll be easier. So I'm going to plug that into star, but it could have been dot. So 3 times negative 1 minus z equals negative 6. Negative 3 minus z equals negative 6. Add the 3 to both sides. Divide by negative 1, and z is 3. Okay, I know I went through that quickly. Feel free to pause the video if you need a minute. All right, and then from there, now I know 2 of my letters, so I'm going to take these 2 and I'm going to go back and plug them into any one of these original equations. Again, just pick the one that looks easiest. I think I'm going to use heart, so I'm going to plug that into heart. So in my heart equation, it says 3 times x, so 3 times negative 1, minus y, plus z, which was 3, should equal negative 1. So 3 times negative 1, that's negative 3, plus 3 would just cancel, right? So negative y equals negative 1, y equals 1. And then the only thing that we have to do now is just make sure that we write our answer as a point and make sure you write them in order alphabetically. So x, then y, then z. Okay, so this is a 3-dimensional system of equations, right? So if you think about, like, if you were thinking about solving this by graphing with a system of equations with just 2, then we're just graphing like on a 2D plane, right? You just have 2 lines across each other. This guy is a 3-dimensional surface. So picture like a Rubik's Cube where you shove 3 straws through it and you're looking for the point where those 3 straws cross each other. Okay, so it's a 3-dimensional point, right? And that is how you solve a system of equations using elimination when you have 3 variables. So again, the general idea is the first thing that we did was we canceled the same letter. I used y. So I canceled y 2 different times using a different pair of equations. We did use, we used heart in both of them. You're always going to have that where one equation will be used for both, but then the other ones should be different. So you cancel one letter twice. Then you take those resulting equations and use them to cancel another letter. And then you just start plugging back into these other equations that you have until you find all of your letters. And that's how you solve elimination.